Hello. I was able to win another challenge this weekend, live on my Twitch. The VOD is going to be up for another week and a half. If you're interested in watching the whole run, but I'm just going to be going over the finals match, which I think was pretty interesting overall. I don't think that I played that well, honestly, throughout the tournament, but it's hard to be hard on myself here because with FAMs you kind of just have to make a good play rather than um, spending a lot of time to make the perfect play. So I think I'm going to go over a lot of the places I made mistakes, and maybe we can learn from those. The deck list is nothing special. Been playing this for months, I'd say at this point, pretty much. Some minor changes in the flex slots, but nothing actually meaningful. Um, all right, let's get into the game match. So this is the finals, and I'm on the draw against Grixis Affinity. I did play against this opponent in the Swiss, and I choose to keep this hand, which in retrospect I think is a mistake. I think that you are supposed to mulligan this hand against Affinity specifically. The way that you win against Affinity in game one is by assembling your engine, and the way you win in the postboard games is with Dust to Dust. And this is just way too slow. I think in the blind you're probably going to keep this, but I think any hand with a basic planes and any hand with a Chancery is probably going to be better than this. And so I did keep this, but I am imagining you're supposed to be mulliganing this sort of hand. Um, I think if I was to do this again, I think I'm supposed to mulligan this hand, but I did not. So, um, also worth noting that my opponent offered a split and I declined. I'm not a huge fan of splitting with people. I think that if you play the tournament, your goal should be to win the tournament. And if your goal is to win the tournament, you should believe that you're favored basically in every match. And if you believe you're favored, you shouldn't be splitting. So that's some of my logic there. I decided to keep this Ash Baron so I can cast the Seagate Oracle on turn 3. So that I'm doing something. It's also worth noting that at this point, I know a lot of stuff about my opponent's hand just based on these lands that they played. I know they don't have any red mana because that would have been played. I know that they don't have any blood fountains. I know they don't have any Ichor Wellsprings, and then I also know that their hand is a keep, right? So their hand can't be like only red cards, and it can't be like only removal spells, because that those hands wouldn't have been keeps. So I do know a decent amount about my opponent's hand already, just from the two lands that they played. But the most notable thing is they don't have a Wellspring and they don't have red mana. I choose to take an island here. They end of turn Toxin Analysis, which makes sense. That card is not particularly good versus my deck. And they cast Thoughtcast. And Dispute. Okay, so I cast Preordain. And here I have a decision as to what I want to do. So if I think that my opponent has drawn into a Wellspring, it's pretty good for me to hold up Prohibit on this turn cycle because countering the Wellspring is excellent for me. If I think my opponent has drawn a Blood Fountain, countering that is also pretty decent. But if their hand is Mirror Enforcers and Refurbished Familiars, then holding up the counter is not very good. So at this point, I basically have to determine, do I want both counters? And do I want to tap out this turn? And do I want to hold up mana this turn? And I think that you want to be casting the Modern Age this turn. The main reason is that the opponent isn't that likely to have Ichor Wellspring. They basically would have had to have drawn it off of this Deadly Dispute. So I guess, or their draw for turn. So I guess they have 3 looks at it. But that's really the only card that you're happy about countering here. And also the snap is not very good. Snap, when you have no fams and no chanceries, is not very good. And also, the only real good target for snap is Kenku, and my opponent knows that I have snap in my deck, so they're not really going to play their Kenku unless they absolutely have to. So I think what I'm supposed to do here is bottom the Prohibit, cast the Modern Age, and then go from there. Most likely play this Mire tapped. But I don't. What's interesting about watching this on Twitch rather than on the Magic Online client is that I get to see how long I took on my decisions. So I choose to take the Prohibit here, and the main reason being that I would like to counter some stuff that my opponent plays, like they're not on board yet. And so if they play Wellspring and I counter it, it's great. So they play a Seed of the Sun on and pass, which is pretty much worst case scenario for me. I mean, it's not the worst case scenario because if they would have played a red land, that would be better for them. But I basically just wasted 2 mana for no reason, which is not great. And here, I have another decision to make. The question is, do I want to hold up 2 counters or just 1 counter and play the Modern Age? And I think that I'm actually supposed to hold up 2 counters now because my opponent would have cast a Refurbished Familiar. They would have cast a Wellspring probably. They probably would have cast a Blood Fountain. So the cards that they're going to have here are probably red cards and Deadly Disputes. And like if I'm able to counter a Deadly Dispute with a Prohibit, it's very good for me. Yeah, just put it that way. Especially if it's a Deadly Dispute on a land, because I effectively get a 2-for-1 for that. So I discard the Snap, which makes sense. Opponent casts Dispute. I'm definitely going to counter here. I cast Dispute again, and now I choose to cast the Ephemerate on the Muldrifter, which I'm pretty sure was a mistake. So it would have been much better, obviously, had I just held up both my counters. Being able to counter the second Dispute would have been fantastic, but that's not what happened. So with this Dispute on the stack, I can choose to Ephemerate the Seagate Oracle in response to guarantee that it resolves, and then sort of force my opponent to kill the Seagate Oracle on their turn, which would either require them to have an untapped red source and a Galvanic Blast, or a Candy Grapple, which I know that they're playing a couple copies of in their deck. But I think it's incorrect to cast this Ephemerate here. So if I don't cast the Ephemerate and I pass to my opponent, what I can do is on their end step cycle this Lorien Revealed for an island, and then untap and have Muldrifter plus Ephemerate plus Prohibit. However, the downside to this is if my opponent casts Refurbished Familiar, I have to discard one of my cards, and probably the card I'm discarding is Prohibit, and then I'm going for Drifter Ephemerate unprotected, which seems pretty unlikely to work, given that my opponent's going to have a red source off this Dispute, and they're also going to have a bunch of mana, so it's kind of a lose-lose scenario. However, I could also just discard the land to the theoretical Refurbished Familiar, and then hope to draw into a land, and then if I don't draw into a land, then I just do my Muldrifter Ephemerate with no protection. If I do, then I have protection up. So I think I made the wrong play here, but the reason I made the wrong play was because I was assuming that my opponent was going to have a Refurbished Familiar and a removal spell. So it's not exactly clear cut that I made the wrong decision, but I think it was the wrong decision for sure. So I take the land. I cast Refurbished Familiar. At this point, I have to discard the Prohibit, especially if they play more creatures. It's going to put me in a spot where I don't actually have time to hold up the counterspell. So we get to loot. At this point, I'm not really doing anything of note. I think the most important decisions were the ones I made earlier, and I think I basically made all of them incorrectly. um, which is interesting, but it is what it is. So they crack the clue, they find a red source, which is really bad for me. Um, I do keep in mind that they have a bunch of Quarkline Shamans in their deck with the Toxin Analysis, but they've used both of the Toxin Analysis, two of the Toxin Analysis at least. Um, but those can only sweep the ground creatures, so I'm fine deploying at least two ground creatures. But yeah, I think my decisions in this game so far have not been great. So they're drawing, as you do. And I'm basically always going to hold a land in my hand for the rest of the game just because they have Reverse Familiar. They cast Candy Grapple on the fam. So here's another decision that I think I make wrong. So I can decide a couple different things. I can either mire back the fam and then Lorien Revealed fam. I can mire back the Seagate Oracle, Lorien Revealed, or I can just cast Lorien Revealed. And I think that the correct play is to cast Lorien Revealed here and then see what I get. And then if I draw a bunch of card draw, I'll probably want to put the fam on top. If I don't draw any card draw, I'll probably want to put the Seagate Oracle on top. But drawing 3 cards before I play the Mortuary Mire gives me a lot more information to work with. Alternatively, I can save the Mortuary Mire for the Muldrifter, which is a reasonable option. But my logic here is that the Mortuary Mire, because I have the Chancery, I'll be able to pick up a Muldrifter in a couple turns anyways. So it's pretty unlikely that I fully run out of card draw. But I think the correct play here is to just cast Lorien Revealed and hold up. See 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Probably just hold up Glacial Floodplain Island and see what you draw, and then go from there. But I decided to put the fam on top. Just not like a heinous play, but I do think it is incorrect. Also, keep in mind that I've been playing 7 rounds or whatever so far of intense Magic, so I think my plays were bad, but you know, I also have to play quickly here because this game is going to be extremely grindy, and I don't want to time out. Okay, so here, this block isn't particularly interesting. They're going to shoot the Vector Glider with the Ichor Wellspring, but there's not much I can do about that. I can't just not block, so. Notably here, if I had held the Mire, then I could put a Muldrifter on top, and if I had a draw spell, I could cast the Muldrifter. And then I draw a fam. So basically now I'm just like super dead. I don't play out the second fam because of a Quarkline Shaman. But now they just pass, so I'm like, okay, maybe I have a chance. So their 5 cards are probably just like lands, removal spells, and I don't even know what else. I guess just those 2 things mostly. If they wipe my board, I could decide to ephemerate the Godforest Faithful, but I'm about to play a Muldrifter, so I feel like saving the ephemerate for that is probably a bit better. And then here, I'm just like, okay, I'll snap my Muldrifter, and if they want to kill 2 other lands to destroy it, that's fine, but they don't. So I'm chaining some card draw, not a whole lot, but I am chaining a little bit. My opponent draws a Spell Bomb, which is really good here. And I choose to ephemerate the Muldrifter in response, which I would do again because the Muldrifter's not, or sorry, the Archaeomancer is not going to have anything to return. My opponent is going to crack the Spell Bomb in response to the Archaeomancer on the stack, rather than in response to the triggers, so it's not going to matter. And now I'm just out of everything, so I'm holding a land for a Reverse Familiar, but we're basically just top decking. We're just in a top deck battle. My opponent plays Munitions, the second one, which is kind of weird. That is not a thing you normally see. I draw a Snap, which is nothing. And I'm essentially just waiting to draw some card draw. But every turn that goes by is not good. I draw another Snap, which does nothing. I could like snap my Faithful and play out an Archaeomancer, but that doesn't actually achieve anything, so I'm just waiting. And once they start drawing card draw and you don't, it's pretty bad. So here I think I'm supposed to snap the bridge in combat, most likely. It's unclear if it would matter, but here I do cast Snap to save my Faithful, which I think makes sense given that my opponent is gonna try to kill me with burn right now with the makeshift munitions. So I think that play makes sense. Player came answer, grab my snap. Yep. Bounce the land. They're probably gonna shoot it at my face, but I don't really care. I have a lot of mana anyways. And then at this point I have to decide if I want to play another Archaeomancer. This does make me weak to Croakland Shaman, but I do have Prismatic Strands, so I can counter the Croakland Shaman sort of. And I played Enforcer. Draw Seagate Oracle. I'm gonna try to keep going. Notably, we have not seen any blood fountains from the opponent, and if they draw that, then I'm kind of super dead. Yeah. But now I'm in a really rough spot because my opponent's just going to kill me with the munitions if I go too low, and I don't have any card draw. So, also, I have some cards exiled. Like I have both my Ephemerate exiled, so I'm never going to be able to cast Ephemerate for the rest of the game, which is not great. So I do decide to snap my Seagate Oracle to try to get some card draw going. They shoot it, and I respond to Strands, and they shoot it again. So that makes sense. These munitions are, I have to force them to use the munitions or they're going to shoot me in the face and kill me. So I think it's fine. And they draw a spell bomb. Here I flashback Strands and name red or something, which is just wrong. I should name black. I don't know why I did this. It's just bad play. Okay, draw an Archaeomancer, which does nothing. I'm going to play a Familiar to hope to chump. I can't go below 5 life, 6 life now, or else I die. So I chump with an Archaeomancer. It's not like that's doing very much for me. Draw a Mulldrifter. Alright. Drawing some more card draw. At this point, I'm kind of worried about them drawing a Croakland Shaman, but there's not much I can do about that, and also, it's not like they have an unlimited amount of material to actually make that happen with. So here I draw Chancery, and I could choose to pick up the Mire, but that might stop them from attacking, or stop them from putting the Mulldrifter in my graveyard, because they know that I have the Mire in hand. So, I mean, probably they're just going to keep attacking anyway, so maybe I was just supposed to play out the Chancery here. The other consideration is that if they... Let me pause the thing here. So, if I return the Mire to my hand, and they play a... what's it called? And they play a Kenku, I have to choose between discarding the Archaeomancer and discarding the Azorius Chancery. And I have no snaps left, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So all the snaps are exiled. There's no Ephemerates, and there's 1 Flicker. So if I discard the Archaeomancer, I'll have to Mire back the Archaeomancer, which is a dead draw. It skips a draw for a turn. And then I can do the Flicker stuff. If I choose to discard the Mire, then I'm going to deck out before they'll deck out. So I'm basically holding this Chancery partially as a hedge against Refurbished Familiar because I'd rather discard Chancery to Refurbished Familiar than discarding Mortuary Mire. Yeah, not great overall. Play Croakland Shaman. At this point, they're going to sweep the board, but it's going to cost them quite a lot here. Like, I don't know how to explain this eloquently, but the first couple artifacts that the Affinity deck sacrifices don't cost it very much. Like, they have a lot of extra artifacts to sack, but every artifact that they sack past that gets more and more expensive every time. Like, going from 10 lands to 9 lands is not very much of a cost, but going from 4 lands to 3 lands is a pretty big cost. And so I basically just have to keep forcing them to do this where they sacrifice their stuff. I'm not sure why they chose to sacrifice the Refurbished or the Mirror Enforcer over the Refurbished Familiar, but they did. So now I draw Ghostly Flicker, which is nice. I'm going to play out a Mulldrifter here. And the way that I'm going to win here, I guess you can't see past the thing, but I'm going to deck out my opponent is the way I'm going to win here. They currently have 10 cards in their deck, and I have 8. Soon I have 6, so I'm going to have to flicker this Mire a bunch, but that is the only way I can win. Because I don't really have enough power in my deck to actually get through the makeshift munitions. So they choose to shoot the Drifter, which makes sense given that that's the same amount of damage as shooting me. So I choose to put a Faithful on top of my deck because I'm at 5 life, and they're going to kill me if I don't. I play an Archaeomancer, return the Flicker, and here the slow loop starts, where I can start just putting Archaeomancers on top of my deck over and over again. But I do want to destroy these munitions with my Dawnbringer Cleric, but that's going to take time. And I kind of wanted to hold up their move soul here. There's a lot of good cards to hit with this. It's pretty unlikely they have Red Source plus Corkland Shaman, but they can easily have another Familiar or another Reinforcer. So they play Blood Fountain. Not much I can do about that. Attack for 2. Had I not played the Faithful, I would be at 4 life and I would have just died. So now I have to destroy these munitions to start off. And if they choose to kill my Archaeomancer in response to this Flicker, then I can... I have a backup Archaeomancer because I put it on top of my deck last turn. So then I play a Mire. I basically have to choose what I want to put on top of my deck. I choose an Archaeomancer. And then I put some Faithfuls and Fams on top of my deck. I'm going to have to keep doing this because I'm going to draw more cards, and I need to have more cards in my deck than my opponents so that they deck first. Because I don't have like a deep analysis or anything to target them with. So at this point, I basically am on the plan of keep putting cards on top of my deck. Hope that it works out. It's interesting that they don't activate the Blood Fountain on the end of turn here. It's possible that they were just like trying to save time by F6ing, but I think that they're supposed to return like some stuff here. I'm just keep putting stuff on top of my deck. I am sort of weary at some point. Like one of their last 6 cards could be another Spell Bomb, and so I kind of want to do this as soon as possible because every draw that they get is another Spell Bomb, and I don't have another Prohibit in my deck. Both of them are exiled, so I only have this one Counterspell and one Flicker effect left. So I can't really take my chances with them drawing a card because I can't counter it. So here they play a Kenku, and I'm out of snaps, so this land is just going to be animated forever. But I choose not to counter it with Remove Soul because I was afraid of them having an untapped red source and a Corkline Shaman. Like, I think I'm beating this Kenku. It's going to be kind of annoying, but I think I'm beating it, so I'm just going to hold the Remove Soul for specifically Kenku. So here I have infinite life, but I have 11 minutes on my clock, and this is game 1, so I can't do this forever. And this is going to take a while to play through these 5 more turns, so I start closing all my tabs. Like, oh shit. Because if we play 2 more games and they're both grindy, there's no way I can do 2 more grindy games in 10 minutes. Luckily for me, though, the sideboarded games are often significantly less grindy because of Dust to Dust, so that's good for me. So also they're attacking every turn, which eats time off my clock. But at this point, I just keep passing back and forth. At this point, I choose to counter the Reinforcer. I think I have enough life that even if they try to wipe my board with Kirkland Shaman, and they counter my Flicker with a kill spell, I'll be fine. So now they're out of cards. Okay, so then at this point, I go into sideboarding, and I changed my screen to this because I'm restarting my Magic Online. I don't want to leak my password, so do this. It should only be for a couple more seconds. So now I'm logging back in. You definitely wanted to be. I should have definitely restarted my game before the last match, but I didn't. So I'm pulling the cards that I think are good. Dust to Dust, Hydroblast. I played against this opponent in the Swiss, and they kept in makeshift munitions post board, which I think is pretty much incorrect. If you're playing a standard affinity deck, you shouldn't be boarding out makeshift munitions, just because the game isn't really about that. It's more about me destroying all of your permanents and you trying to have me not destroy all of your permanents. And makeshift munitions is mana intensive and super slow, and also requires you to have permanents in play. So, um, but because I saw how they played in the post board games, which were they kept munitions in, they were trying to go for that plan, and then also they had some Pyroblast. I wanted to keep in more Hydroblasts. I don't usually like boarding in Hydroblast against Affinity in large quantities, mainly because their answers to Dust um, can't be Hydroblasted. So if they're going to board in Pyroblast, that's not going to hit Dust to Dust, and so my Hydroblast is not as effective because their Pyroblast is not as effective. And also they're going to board out the munitions and their Corkline Shaman in general. Um, but against this particular opponent, given that I knew how they played, um, I was more likely to keep in some Hydroblasts. And I've played against this deck probably like 200, like not like literally no exaggeration. I probably played against this deck like 200, like maybe even 400 times. 400 is probably pretty high, honestly, but definitely hundreds of times. And so I'm just considering like the different stuff I can do here. Negate is better than Prohibit in a lot of spots because you can hit Rebuke and Thoughtcast. But okay, so do you keep this hand against Affinity post board? This is the question, and the answer to that question is kind of complicated, I think, because in general you don't really want to be keeping hands that don't contain white mana against Affinity for the reason that you need double white to cast Dust to Dust, and your deck doesn't actually support double white very well. Um, and so it's not great. However, Sunscape's pretty good, and I have some ways to dig, and also Snap can generate me an extra white mana. So I think I keep this hand. I think it's correct too. Yeah. Also worth noting that, like, let's say I mulligan to 5, looking for Dust to Dust, and like a white source, and my opponent goes, like, turn 2 Duress you, you just never win that game, so. Okay, it's preordained. So I find a white source, so I'm going to keep the white source. They cast a Wellspring, which is like their best play. This is like their best play, so it doesn't actually really tell me anything about their hand. Yeah. Play tap land and pass after thinking. So it's like possible they have something that they could have played, like maybe a Refurbished Familiar. Pretty sure they have 7 cards or 6 cards in hand, so casting a Dispute doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like they're never going to play that and then just go to cleanup. So I think most likely they have like for Refurbished Familiar and like a Deadly Dispute here. I think those are the most likely cards for them to have. So I'm going to cast the Familiar. Like playing a land doesn't actually create a priority pass, so I can have my counterspells up here. But if they wanted to, they could respond to the fan with a Dispute. So I'm just going to pass. So they decide to not kill the fam on the end step, which I'm pretty sure if they have a kill spell, they're definitely going to use it. So that is interesting to me. That means that I think that makes it more likely that they have a Pyroblast, which is like the interaction spell that can't kill the fam here. They do play the Refurbished Familiar, which makes sense. I had thought they had this last turn, given that they spent time thinking. And here, I can't discard the Modern Age because it's the only way that I can generate cards, and I can't discard the Snap because this is the only way I can generate the second white mana. So I'm just priced into discarding my extra land here. And back to me. So I play the Modern Age, obviously, before by playing a land. Make a Spire Blast, which makes sense. I'm going to counter back because I need to find Dust to Dust. So here, I feel like I just played horribly this whole tournament, but here I make another mistake. So the obvious play here is discard Hydroblast, play an island, float a white, snap my fam, Dust to Dust these 2 red sources. But I decided to bounce their creature, which is just a bad play, I'm pretty sure. Like, there is some upside to bouncing the Refurbished Familiar, because let's say I go snap my fam, dust their lands, pass to them. Then if I draw a 5-drop, if I draw my second Lorien or my Muldrifter, or my Deep Analysis, which I have 2 of now, they get a lot worse because I can't actually cast them. I have to play the fam and pass. So that's something worth considering. It's also worth considering that I have a Modern Age in play, so my next draw is going to be the best of two possible cards. But I'm also going to have a prohibit, so like it's possible that I could draw into like Muldrifter plus land, in which case I wouldn't have to play out the fam. I don't know. There's a bunch of considerations here. I think on average you're supposed to be bouncing the fam here, but I don't know. I just decided to bounce their creature. So you're definitely supposed to hit these red sources 100% because Power Blast is a magic card. And if I draw Archaeomancer, then I can return this Dust to Dust, and Power Blast counters Archaeomancer. So now I have nothing. So that stinks. And I made them return this to their hand, so makes sense. So now I'm gonna counter the Spell Bomb. So now I draw Lorien, cast Lorien. So now I have to decide, okay, do I want to play Ashburns or not? And the reason you don't want to play Ashburns here is because I have no other way to cast Dust to Dust. Like I don't have a second white source. So missing my land drop stinks, but not being able to cast Dust to Dust stinks even more. So they draw 4 cards and they don't have a land, so this is good for me. They're out of lands here. If I can cast Dust to Dust once more, then I'll probably win. So I grab my planes. At this point, with only 4 mana, I can't cast Archaeomancer and cast Dust to Dust, so I cast Preordain to try to find another Dust to Dust, which I do find. And this ends the game. So like there's theoretical stuff they can do, but now they're just extremely dead. So we play for a couple more turns and then they die. So overall, I don't think my play was particularly good throughout this game. I made some kind of boneheaded errors, but also you have to play in a way. Pause here. You have to play in a way with this deck where you make the second best play that's fast rather than the optimal play that's if it takes you a lot of time. Like I can't be thinking for 20 seconds in each of these spots or thinking for a minute in each of these spots when I want to. And also I've been playing, this is my whatever 10th match of the day. So, but it's always good to look at these matches and look at how I played, which is always interesting. So if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I think that the Blue Eye Familiar's deck is pretty good right now. It's obviously, I think, kind of been power crept out quite a bit by the new cards, but if you know the deck, you can make it work. So have a nice day. Thanks for watching.